How does a freelance producer find a show to produce?
A freelance producer finds shows to produce by a couple of ways. One would be looking online, looking in the trades to see what's out there, what's being produced. I would say also by networking and staying in touch with people so that people come to them about different opportunities. And then 3 would be creating your own opportunities. So it's all cyclical, if you will, in terms of how you find different opportunities. So for example, even for myself as an executive producer, sometimes I'll read the trades and I'll understand that a show has just been sold and I'll say, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of that team. Let me figure out how I'm going to make sure that they know about me. So I'll work with my agent to reach out to them, and that's how, that will go. Sometimes people call me personally, say, hey, I think you'd be great for this particular project, and I discuss it. And then 3rd would be sometimes I'm really interested in a particular topic and I make the decision that I'm going to create something and I'll build a deck around it, a development deck around pitching that particular project.
So then if you're in the trades and you see something that you are like, I want to be a part of, you contact your agent and then he or she on your behalf sends some kind of a query letter or
yes.
letter of intent or something?
No, what happens, so when I find opportunities that are in the trades and I go back to my agents, I ask if they can do some digging. Can they reach out to that particular production company? Can they send my resume and let them know that I'm interested and available? And you'll have what's known as a general. So every so often those kinds of things happen. Well, I'll do my own digging. There's other opportunities where my agent will bring me opportunities and say, hey, a particular production company reached out to me and wants to have a meeting with you. So sometimes it'll happen that way. And then, like I said, the 3rd way is also me reaching out with a project and saying, oh, I would love to do this particular project. Here's a deck that I'm building. Maybe this 3rd-party production company can work with me to expand it. So it works a couple of different ways.
And so if there is something that you want to produce, how do you know what production company to reach out to?
Well, if there's a particular production that is coming out that I want to be a part of, I research. So basically in the trades, it will say the production company that has, that particular show. And sometimes I may just do my own Google research to find out, which production company has certain shows. So a lot of it is just taking the opportunity and the time to do that digging myself. Mm-hmm.
So if you were going to do something that's similar to Gospel Live or whatever, you would go to a production company that have produced similar shows in the past?
Well, with Gospel Live in particular, I would love to work with the same people. So I would go back to that production company and production companies and say, I would love to build this out with you. It just makes sense because we had a great rapport and a great relationship, and it's so close. I wouldn't want to, bring that somewhere else. I would want to work with the same people. What I mean is that even for example, right now, there is a really popular R&B group that just got a deal to do a documentary. I saw that in the trades. I saw which production company it was, and I went out to my agent and I said, I want to go up for that show. So that's what I mean in terms of, going up for different projects that might be released in the trades.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. We won't ask which one because I don't want to jinx it.
No problem. Okay. That's why I said 90s R&B.
Okay.
But I reached out to the group themselves personally, and then I went to my agent and I said, do you mind going to this particular production company and ask them, do they have a showrunner? Because I would love to go up for that show because I love the story. I grew up with this story. I already know a lot of the story, and I want the world to feel the type of excitement that I feel.
And have you heard back?
I have not heard back just yet. We're still digging, but that's honestly how certain projects come along.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Gospel Live came along because one of the production companies reached out to me. But I knew at that time, like, gospel is something that's very important to me personally. So I knew that I wanted to do it like before I even interviewed. So yeah, sometimes things come along in that fashion.
Right. Do you always interview for a producing job?
No, I don't always interview for a producing job, but I'm always taking meetings. So what that means is someone may come to me and say, hey, I think you would be great for this particular production. That's not, I don't necessarily do a formal interview, but I always do a meeting. Like, is this something that would work for me in terms of story, timeline, what they need? And then other times I do have more formal interviews where I'm introducing myself to the production company. They've never heard of me. I've got to share with them, you know, my background, why I'm interesting, why I feel I'm the best person for the job. And I'll also say for formal interviews, I always make sure to follow up after, like my kind of secret sauce, and I'll give that because I think it's important to share, is that, you know, always leave the people that you're speaking with, always leave them with something. So, you know, it's my job to make sure that I leave a particular impression on people. And that is typically, you know, adding a little extra. So for example, even when I interviewed for Gospel Live, I came back and I said, hey, you know, in the event that I'm still being considered, here are some specs, or here are some examples of some of my favorite shows. Here are some examples of some songs I really like. I felt like it was important for me to leave an impression in that way and do a little due diligence, do a little work to show that I really love the opportunity. So I'll give that little nugget in terms of when I do formal interviews, I typically try to leave folks with a little something.
And are most of these interviews or generals Zoom, or they're in person?
A lot of generals these days are Zoom. Very rarely do I go into offices now. By the time I'm going into the office, they're fairly certain that we're going to work together, or, you know, we're in the final stages of making that decision. So, yeah.
How do you prepare for an interview?
I prepare for an interview by doing research on the production company that's interviewing me. I also prepare by reading the deck that they may send. So every so often I am applying or interviewing for a particular show. And so they often have what's known as a development deck. So they'll send me materials on the particular project. So I like to be prepared to speak about the project, why I'm interested in it, why I feel I'm the best person for it. And then also make sure that even if I don't get the role, that specific role, that the production company is interested in working with me. So I'll share, you know, a bit more about my experience. So I absolutely prepare in that way. And I always feel like that helps me leave an impression, but also I enjoy doing my due diligence, doing my kind of homework before I meet with people.
And what materials will you bring with you for the interview?
Oftentimes I bring my credit page and I'll bring my bio. They typically have those documents already ready. Nowadays, I don't necessarily need to showcase a reel, but I will always mention the shows that I'm really proud of and also some of the awards that I've won, because I like to showcase that as a showrunner, I always am looking to do extra work or take the extra step of the show getting recognized. I think that those things are really important. So I like to showcase, you know, what I did on a particular project and then the results of that project as well.
And then once you're hired, what are your first steps for the production?
Sure. So as an executive producer and showrunner, when I get hired for a show, I first select my executive in charge of production, or I get introduced to them if they're already hired. So your executive in charge of production is basically like your money person. So for example, I'm overseeing a particular show. I need to make sure that I have the budget to execute what I want for my show. So I start there, that I start meetings with my executive in charge, and then we start to build out our staff. So I learn from the budget, you know, how many producers I have, you know, what kind of line items are allocated for different parts of my production, and then I start my hiring process. At the same time, I'm also starting the creative process. So what I will do is create what's known as a format. So your format helps you to document how your show is going to move from A to B. And so I will create a format that my producers that I end up hiring will end up using to help set the template of the show. The format may continue to grow and change, but it's my job as the showrunner to set the template for the show, and then my producing team can add on to that.
And with format, do you mean in terms of how many act breaks and where commercials will be? Sorry.
Yeah, so what I mean by format is how exactly my show is going to move. So if I have an hour-long show, typically I have 5 or 6 act breaks, and you have segments in each act. So how your show is going to move. Do you start with a cold open? Do you start with your graphic open? Do you have, if it is a music special, do you have packages that are a part of it? If it's a documentary series, do you have certain kind of elements or interstitials in your show? So I make those choices before I join my team, or I hire my team, excuse me. I make those choices before I hire my team, and then my team has that template to continue to add to as they continue. Now, I will say every showrunner is different. So some showrunners don't do that. They don't take that opportunity. But for me, I think because I grew up as a writer and producer, I love taking, a pass at what I want the show to be, so that it is a template for how my producers are going to continue to build upon the show.
It's interesting. And so are you doing this template like within a binder, online, on a board?
Yeah, so I would say my formats are typically on computer, but they also are replicated on a board. So I have a board that lives at home, and I also have a board that lives at the production company. And that way, when I am pitching the format to the production company, they can see it up on the board. And if we need to move any segments, we can do that live while we are in the office. And then I can also make sure that that's replicated on my Google Drive, basically, yeah.
What are you using? I'm just curious what software to do the online version.
Oh, just Excel. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
So I have a grid that I've been using since like 2008. I would say that I use. So I have a format, and then I also have a script format. So basically, when you have a format of a show, you also end up having a script version of that. And so my writer does the pass using that format. And I've been using both of those documents again since I started in 2006, but the show format since 2008, but I've been using those since I got started in the business.
Can you help us understand how many days or weeks you will typically work on a show?
I typically work on a show anywhere from about 8 to 12 weeks, depending. That's not right. I likely work on shows about 16 to 20 weeks. So that's about 4 to 5 months. As the person that's helming the project, I'm on the show longer than anyone else because I'm helping, hire everyone. I'm putting the format together. I'm explaining to our production company and network the vision of the show. And a lot of that comes before I hire everyone and they get going. So my team is on a lot less longer than myself, but I am on from the very beginning with development all the way to the very end when we develop and deliver the show.
And where are they putting out these notices to hire people? If I'm looking for a job to be sort of below the line or whatever, where would I find that?
A lot of job opportunities are on different websites like Staff Me Up and LinkedIn, but a lot of the opportunities that I've had throughout my entire career have really been word of mouth. I have to be honest. I think that there are a lot of projects that are broadcast, but in terms of real tried and true hiring, you're getting a phone call. So a lot of times I hear about opportunities either through phone call or email where a production company reaches out to me, my agent reaches out to me, or a team member, a friend reaches out to me.
Oh, okay. So these are relationships you've formed from previous productions.
Yes.
And then they go, yes.
Yes.
Kristen, okay.
I think that connections and networking incredibly valuable. If you do not have connections, I don't know how you're going to make it in the industry. I think from the time I started, even my first internship was because of a Groton School alum named Stephen Hill, who was an executive at BET. That's how I got my first internship. So everything is about connections. I can trace most of my jobs to one person or two people. So you've got to be a good person, be a good sport, be a good team player. When I talked a little bit previously about the fact that I love for my community to eat, that's what that means. I'm always giving opportunities to people. And because of that, I think a lot of people give opportunities to me.